I'm back in my studio and I'm going to do another little follow along session. So today's session is going to be some skies in watercolour. I'd love you to have a go, I'd love you to try them, and if you do, please post what you do in the comments below. So I'm going to turn the camera around and we'll get painting. So I've got my paper set up here. So hopefully you can see that okay. There we go, that's a bit better. Right, I've divided with a piece of masking tape my paper into four just so that I can show you four different skies in watercolour. So the first thing that I'm going to do, and this happens with most skies, is it's usually painted wet in wet. So I'm going to start off by gently wetting the paper. You wouldn't normally be working quite as vertically as this with watercolour. You normally have it at around a 30-40 degree angle. So I'm just going to have to be careful about controlling my water. But you can see I'm going back and forward over it a few times just to make sure that it is evenly wet. I'm going to get rid of a little puddle at the bottom there. Now I'm going to mix up my colour, which I'm going to be using a mixture of two blues, mostly ultramarine. But I'm going to have a little bit of a cobalt blue in there as well, just to make it a bit more of a summer sky, a bit brighter. So I've got the brush on my paint. I'm using a wash brush, so this is it's made by Da Vinci, but I love these brushes. And I'm just going to go backwards and forwards across my piece of wet paper, just doing it gently. Going backwards and forwards and giving me a nice even sky. Now whilst that's wet, you can come back in and run back up if you wish to, if there's any streaks showing, but you've got to do all of that whilst it is still wet. And what will happen is the blue that I've put on there floats on the water and gives you a nice flat surface. But if you decide you've got this and you decide you want to put some clouds into it, there's a couple of ways you can do it. So the first thing is I've just wet and dried my brush off. So the first thing you can do is just lift out clouds with your brush. So each time I lift some out, I'm putting my brush back in my water pot and then I'm just drying it off on my cloth. And that makes it thirsty, so it'll pick colour up off the paper. Now you do have to do this before your paper dries. So we're doing that. Now there is another way of doing it, and I've just got a scrunched up piece of kitchen towel. And let's just come back in. So you can just lift that and you can see the colours being lifted onto the kitchen towel. Now you might see that I've got this dark patch here, and that's because I'm working so vertically and the paint is just running down. So I'm just going to take that out just so it doesn't cauliflower and back run on me as it dries. So that's the first simplest way of painting a sky. So you've wet the sky, wet the paper, laid your colour down, and then if you wish to, you can lift a few clouds out. So that's number one. Now the second one, a lot of these will start the same because doing a wash, a wet in wet wash, means you get a nice even coverage of paint. So it's usually what's done when you want to lay quite a large area of colour quickly, because you can do it and float it on. Again, I'm just making sure my paper is evenly wet with my brush. There we go. Same colour mix that I'm doing as before, but this time instead of painting the whole sky and then lifting the clouds out as we did here, I'm going to do something that's known as negative painting. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to paint around where my clouds will be, leaving gaps for those clouds. Let's just turn you ever so slightly so you can see what I'm doing there. got here, because I'm painting vertically, I've got some little runs going on here, so I can just, like we did in the previous one, I can just push that back. The difference with this one is you seem to get more drama because the white stays very white, because you haven't put the blue on and then lifted it, so it's just stayed that white all along. I'm just going to add a bit more blue down there. And you do get some of these things happening, which I'm going to show you a little bit more in a little while, which is, it's kind of that drama of the movement of the clouds. So I'm just going to turn this way a little bit and work in this corner. And what I want to work on this time is an evening sky. So again, I'm just gently wetting the paper, making sure it's nice and even. Okay, so again, same blue at the top. So it's my mixture of my cobalt and my ultramarine. Starting up the top here. Nice strong mix. And I'll come back up to the top in a minute, because you'll see that as the paint dries, because you've got that water under there, it fades. Now I'm gradually taking the paint off my brush. I want this to kind of come down to nothing. Then I'm cleaning my brush off, and I'm going to use a yellow ochre, which is a warm yellow. It's more sort of a browny yellow. And I'm going to come down from the bottom up. And I'm going to try not to mix the two together too much, because I don't want green. But that gives you that sort of late afternoon sky. If you ever had a look at the sky sort of early evening, you often get the bit above the trees is just this sort of pale golden colour. So back over into this corner, this last corner here. And what I'm going to do here is something a bit stormy. Just going to get another brush out. So again, we start off in the same way. I'm just wetting all the way down on my paper. You may have noticed that I've left a little bit at the bottom of each sky, and that's because I'm going to go back when I've finished painting the skies and just put a little tiny landscape at the bottom to give you a context. Okay, so we've got that there. Now this one, I want some big clouds coming in here. So I've got loads of colours. I've got a grey, Payne's grey, I've got some of the ultramarine. I'm going to add some of my rose into that as well. I want these real purpley colours. Now some of what I wanted to do on this has already happened. I'm coming back with my yellow ochre. Just a little bit of this down at the bottom. It's that light breaking through after the storm. But I want this rain to come back further down. So I've just got a dry, fluffy brush. And I'm just dragging my rain down here. And the thing with that is it does lighten up some of your colour, so I'm going to come back in, just put the base of my clouds back in, And I'm doing all of these have been done wet in wet, so I've been getting all of this painting done whilst the paper is still wet. Now this one is beginning to dry off, so I should stop. So remember that phrase, walk away from the painting. So when it starts to dry off, again, I'm just going to take that dribble of painting out from up there, and we're just going to let that develop for a few minutes and see what happens. There is one other thing you can do. If you wet your fingers, so literally just dip your fingers into your water pot so you've got wet fingers, you can also do this, which adds rain to it as well. And then just let that run. You don't need much, it's just a little bit. So I'm going to let that all run and settle, and we'll see what that looks like in a few minutes. So let's come back up to our first one up here, and we can put, it looks like a summer landscape to me, so let's just have a few trees in here. You've all done your trees, I hope. So I'm just going to give myself a tree line coming along the bottom here. And then we can have a nice bright summer field of corn or something, and I shall come back into that. Let's give that a few seconds to settle. Actually, whilst that's settling, I'll just add a bit more dark into the trees. Just at the base here, we'll just have a little bit more shadow colour. Coming through here. I don't know if you can hear it, but I've got a lovely little bee in the room with me, so I shall make sure he gets out when I've finished here. And then I'm just going to do cornrows in there to give me some perspective. So let's give you a look at that one. So that's our first summer sky. So let's move over to the second one. Again, it could be a nice summer sky. I think what I'm going to do with this one is just have some distant hills, very simply. Just mixing up a slightly stronger colour here. And some brighter green in the foreground. With a few other bits there, so it's just a very simple landscape, and depending on the scale of your landscape, it can make your sky seem more or less epic. Let's just take a little bit out there. There we go. I'm just going to leave that one there. So again, let's see if we can, getting and see that's that one. We need, oops, I'm getting caught with my water pot, that's my trouble. So that's our simple little landscape with that one. So let's come down to this one, our third one. And let's have some trees in this one with this evening sky. I'm going to have quite blue-grey trees here, so we'll just have again using this dry brushing technique that I was talking to you about with the previous video, which if you haven't seen, take a little look on painting trees and dry brushing. There we go, so a few trees, let's get some trunks going in there. So I'll just have one or two little trunks coming through and down to the bottom. So just putting, sorry I got carried away there, enjoying myself too much. Just ground those down and put those in there. So we've got that little area of trees. Let's see if I can get this down so you can see that. It's just that evening sky with the trees. And then finally, just lower it down ever so slightly, we have our stormy sky. Now when you do what I did there, you never quite know what's going to happen. It's really quite dramatic. But what I'm going to do on this one, I think, let's have a ruin, shall we? Leave a little hole for a broken window. I will post close-up pictures of all of these when I'm done. I'll put those in the comments. So there we go, we just got a little ruin on the bottom there. And there we go. So again, the size of the ruin gives scale to your clouds. So they could be little clouds, or the way I've done that ruin, they really are quite big and dramatic. Let's just have a little look at these without the tape on there. Just cleans it up a little bit. Let's give you a view of the whole 4 of them. There we go. Next. There. So there we go. So hopefully you can see that. So that's all 4 skies in watercolour. I do hope you'll have a go. Let me just say my goodbyes. There we go. So I hope you'll have a go. Please post your pictures below. If you've got any questions about any techniques or colours or anything you need to know, just drop me a message and I'll do my best to answer them all. Thank you very much. Bye.